Lincoln?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. All right, guys. Quick review here. Trying to understand the new modern version of AP World History, going back a little bit to give us some context. So we're going to do a quick review on the rise of the Islamic religion, civilization, and culture. And this map here pretty much shows in the blue the expanse of Islam around the world. It's going to be a global religion, Shiite here in Iran and Iraq, and the light blue are going to be our Sunni Muslims. And it's going to start around the city of Mecca here in Saudi Arabia. And before Islam comes, you have the confluence of Europe, Africa, and Asia, the crossroads of the world, ancient Mesopotamia. And it's in this area that we've got two big empires had been in power for a long time. In the west, we've got the great Byzantine Empire that carried over from old Rome. And in Persia, modern-day Iran, we have the Sassanid Empire. But this area is very key as Mecca sits on a key crossroads of trade routes, like the Silk Road coming from Asia, the Spice Road, eventually the Indian Ocean trade, the Trans-Sahara trade route, gold salt route coming out of Africa, and like ironwork coming out of Europe. So in this area is a lot of trading and traders. The movers and shakers of ancient history are the Arab merchants, who are semi-nomadic, Bedouins who are out wandering the area of this region. And so a lot of different ethnicities and cultures and religious backgrounds melting here. And Mecca was one of those cities or rendezvous where several times a year there is a large international market where everyone comes. Arabic, African, European, Asian, nomad, semi-nomad, you name it, they were there. And it is here that we find this large black rock known as the Kaaba. And geologically, it doesn't fit anywhere else. For some, it has religious connotation to it. Some believe it's where Abraham was going to sacrifice his son Isaac, or where Abraham kicked Ishmael into the desert. So for monotheistic faiths and polytheistic faiths, idols were set up, statues, idols, animistic gods, polytheistic gods were placed around the Kaaba. And around it, the central market or bazaar is going to grow as merchants who would see a group of, let's say they were Hindu believers, they would call to them, here's a bunch of Roman Catholics, call to them, would say, hey, come to our store where you could buy, sell, trade, and worship freely. Now that's a very simplistic kind of modern example, but that's the point I want you guys to see. So we have the Kaaba. Today, this is what it would look like surrounded during the Hajj, which we're going to talk about shortly. So it is in this area that monotheism is going to grow. We have the home of not only Judaism, but Christianity in this area. And so while there's a strong support for Judaism and a lot of Christians, there are still people who worship their traditional polytheistic or animistic gods. And so Allah is going to be the Arabic word for God. And it is here where the Prophet Muhammad will be born somewhere near 570 or so, we think. And so Muhammad is going to grow up very poor. He will be orphaned very young. And he is going to grow up eventually and work for a lower middle class trading family. Like the example I use, he's the guy in the back loading and unloading all of the cargo. And then in his 30s, he's going to marry a very rich widower, a lady named Khadijah, who is the owner of a large trading business. Muhammad is now going to assume the partnership of this business, and it's his job to get people to come to their store, if you will. But he looks at some of the very schwarmy, like greasy used car salesman business practices and the worshiping of the idols, and this bothers him. So he just doesn't like it, so he will go and he will study for a short time with some Jewish rabbi. And he, Hebrews are the chosen people, and, the Torah and the Ten Commandments, the covenant, okay, he's got that. Answers some of his questions, but not all. Then he goes and studies with Christian bishops and priests, and he's like, okay, Jesus and Paul came, Gentiles, okay, get it, Sermon on the Mount, these other things, awesome. But for some reason there was a piece missing. So when he's around, 40, Muhammad is going to go out into the desert. He's going to think and he is going to meditate. And bam! Meditating, God will send his messenger angel, the archangel Gabriel, to a cave to visit Muhammad. And he will speak to Muhammad in Arabic. And this is a big moment because the learned languages were Latin and Hebrew. And here is Gabriel speaking Arabic to Muhammad. And he says, you, Muhammad, have been picked, this average Joe Muslim. You are going to be the last in a long line of prophets, going back to Jesus and Moses and Father Abraham. You are the last interpretation of God's message. God said, one day I will bring all people to me, and you, Muhammad, are their last chance. You're going to rise and warn your fellow Arabs. They're going to stop their schwarmy business practices. They're going to stop their worshiping of the false idols. This is your job. And Muhammad's like, seriously, me? Why me? Well, because you're special, Muhammad. You are the prophet. Go and say this. And this becomes known as the Quran, or God's holy word. This is what you've deviated from the path. This is your last chance to come back. And so this is the start of the Islamic faith. Islam means surrender to Allah, submit to Allah, or to God's will. That is what Muhammad is to go and do. His first convert becomes his wife Khadijah and a few others. But most people do not listen. They don't like it. Muhammad is chasing off customers. He's costing them business. So after the death of his wife Khadijah, Muhammad is forced to flee from Mecca north to the city of Medina, where he is going to arbitrate a dispute over water rights. And this is in 622. And this is very significant because this is the start of the Islamic calendar. Muhammad's leaving Mecca to go to Medina. Now, Medina is the complete opposite of what was going on in Mecca, where very few people listened to Muhammad. They persecuted his followers. Many in Medina convert to Islam. And there's an assassination plot on Muhammad's life that he survives. So his followers will spend about 10 years attacking the trading caravans going into and out of Mecca. It is at this time that basic norms and beliefs of Islamic society are going to take shape. This is where you become a Muslim. We're going to get back to that in a second or two. And so 10 years later, Mecca is weakened, and Muhammad returns in 632, and here he sets an all-important precedent where he forgives the people of Mecca. He said, you tried to assassinate me, you persecuted my followers, but a tenet of this religion is forgiveness, so I'm going to forgive you. And you are going to join the Ummah. The Ummah, before this time, your loyalty was to your Bedouin tribe. When you become a Muslim, you join the Islamic Ummah, or the greater tribe of Muslims in the world. And so Muhammad is able to convert many people from Mecca to Islam. Unfortunately, 2 years later, depending on your beliefs, he is either going to ascend into heaven from Jerusalem or he is going to die. And the teaching, what Muhammad brought, will be basically there is only one God, and that is Allah. There are no other gods besides him. And since Gabriel spoke to Muhammad, Muhammad transmitted things orally. It was a rich storytelling oral tradition among the Arabic tribes. Eventually, what Muhammad said, what Gabriel told him, is going to be written down into the Quran. Quran would be like, the Christian version of the Bible, the Old and the New Testament. God's holy word, the holy book of Islam, what Gabriel told Muhammad. And so, remember that Islam is not just a religion, it is a culture. And it is here that the cultural norms are going to begin to take place. To be a good Muslim, number one, a person must be honest in their public and private affairs. Remember, most guys are merchants. Secondly, a good Muslim must practice modesty in their habits. Success is fine, but don't be flashy. Pork and consumption of alcohol are strictly forbidden. Because of the involvement of his wife, status of women needs to be improved. Property needs to be equally divided among a person's heirs. There needs to be careful regulation of marriage. And the difficult thing is, once a person becomes a Muslim, their allegiance is to Islam. It is to Allah. Allah is eternal. So once you give that word, you can no longer break it. In the old days, if you formed an alliance with another tribe and you shook hands, it only lasted while each of you were alive. But Allah is eternal, is everlasting. So once you're in, you cannot go back on your word. And one of the things that allows Islam to spread really far, really fast, are the relative ease of practice. With Judaism, you've got the Torah and the Ten Commandments. Christianity, you've got that, plus Jesus' teachings and the Sermon on the Mount and the writings of Paul. In Islam, there are the 5 pillars. 4 are mandatory. 1 is kind of optional. Pillar number 1 is faith, the profession of faith. All right, there is only one God, and it is Allah. Muhammad is his servant. And then you've got to ask forgiveness before you pray or recite the Quran. Allah, I'm sorry, these are the bad things I have done. All right, so there's 1. Number 2 is prayer. Every Muslim must pray 5 times a day, no matter where you are, in the direction of Mecca, the Kaaba, where the holy shrine is. Number 3 is all Muslims must practice alms, to tithe, to donate to the poor and the less fortunate, especially the widows and the orphans. Number 4, this is my buddy YL, must participate in Ramadan, the 40 days of fasting, no eating food or consuming liquid during daylight hours for 40 days. And number 5 is the 5th one. It's the only one that is optional. Once in your life, if you are physically and financially able, you should travel to Mecca to partake in the Hajj, the symbolic area where Muhammad returned to Mecca, the area where he was tempted by the devil and is able to resist the devil. You take part in that celebration at least one time. Those are the 5 pillars. One of the things that existed under Muhammad, since he studied with Hebrews and Christians, they were people of the book. They were people of the scripture. Muslims, Christians, and Hebrews have a lot of the same prophets, Abraham, Moses, those stories. So, and even some Zoroastrians were considered people of the book, people of the scripture. So there was tolerance for other monotheistic faiths. You just had to pay what is known as a head tax. After Muhammad is where things get interesting. Who is Muhammad's successor? He was special. He was picked by Allah. He's the one who got to talk to Gabriel. So what do? The different factions, Mecca and Medina, were arguing, and eventually we get the lieutenant, the helper, the replacement of Muhammad. The servant of Allah is known as the Caliph, a political and a religious leader who governs the Islamic community. Today, here in the lime green, there's one of the two main sects of Islam is a Sunni Muslim. Sunnis are about like 83 or so % of the Muslims in the world today who believe the Caliph must be the best Muslim possible, an elected leader. And here, if you can see in the dark forest green, is the other main sect of Islam, Shia or Shiite Islam, who believes the leader must be a direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, found primarily today in Iran and southern Iraq. The first caliph is a guy named Abu Bakr. He is not only Muhammad's uncle, but he was his oldest living convert and could get the people from the two cities, Mecca and Medina, to work together. And it's under him that Islam goes through its great period of expansion. By 643, Muslims are in Mesopotamia, and they're watching a war between the Byzantine Empire and the Sassanid Empire. And they turn, and one branch goes eastward. And by 710, they've made it all the way to the Indus River Valley in modern-day Pakistan. Another branch goes west across North Africa. By 711, they're up into Spain, and they make it all the way to the Loire Valley, the city of Tours, in 732. Well, a third branch goes up into southern Russia. It was just a rocket-fast expansion of a religion or an idea, the quickest one ever. In order to keep people together, and we'll go over the reasons for success in a minute, to make sure that Islam was being practiced the same worldwide, we get a new group of people known as ulama, a person of higher learning, and their writings and discussions on everything from education to crime and punishment allow them to create the Sharia. They wanted to keep, whether you were Sunni or Shia, Islam exactly the way it was under Muhammad. So Sharia is the divine Islamic law that will govern your political life, your social, your commercial, and your religious life. It literally governs everything that you do. Allah sees all. These are the rules set forth, follow them. And from this great period of expansion, one of the reasons for success is Muslims did not damage a lot of infrastructure. Why destroy it if we're going to have to rebuild it? But following in their wake will become the great missionary Muslims, these Sufis, who are not as rigid as the Shiites or the Sunnis, and they were able to blend local religious traditions and wrap them into Islam, gaining many converts. So here are the first 5 caliphs: Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, and Mu'ayyina. These 5 guys had a lot of respect of the faithful for the simple fact that they all personally knew Muhammad. They lived with him, they studied with him. Think of them as like Jesus' 12 apostles for Islam. So under them, Islam expands. And here is why. Number 1 was tolerance for other faiths. Number 2, it's the 5 pillars, the relative ease of practice. Number 3, people trapped in the wars between the Byzantine and Sassanid Empire, Muslims were seen as liberators from the violence and heavy taxation. Islamic society was the only open and peaceful society. In Islam, you could change your social class from poor to wealthy. After all, look at Muhammad. Next, Muslims had been traders, merchants for hundreds of years, working along the trade routes. People were comfortable interacting with them. They were multilingual. They knew how to work with other people. There was the long war, the destructive war between the Byzantines and the Sassanians. I said little destruction of infrastructure, and the original leaders and generals were excellent. Excellent leadership among the military leaders. So here is the unparalleled expansion I just told you about as they branched east, west, and north. Following the fifth Caliph of Mu'ayyina, there is a civil war. This is when the Islamic schism will take place, where we have the original Umayyad dynasty, people from Mecca, did all the hard work. They oversaw the moving of Arabic society from a nomadic or semi-nomadic Bedouin one to living in an urban city, a more urban city. After a while, they were accused of being worldly and corrupt by the Abbasid family, a rival family, one of Muhammad's uncles, and they will reign until right around 900. The original capital was Damascus, Syria, and it will eventually move to Baghdad, Iraq. And it's here in the late 900s, right a little bit before the Crusades, that Islam is going to splinter into separate caliphates. The empire was simply just too big for one person to manage. But remember, in the Byzantine Empire, the church worked for the government. In Islam, the government works for the church. It's a theocratic entity. So we're going to have separate caliphates or spheres of influence because the empire was just too big, too multi-ethnic, multilingual. But the great unifier was all Muslims can speak Arabic, so you could communicate that way. And Muslims made fantastic achievements in the art of steel manufacturing with Damascus steel and acid etching. Wonderful mosaic art, the colored geometric tiles, making pretty geometric patterns. Literature, Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, Aladdin and the Magic Lamp, the Voyages of Sinbad the Sailor are written down and come out of this time. In Baghdad is the great university known as a madrasa, as Islamic scholars went across Africa and parts of Europe and Asia to study and learn and bring those collections back and add on to known knowledge. The medical advancements of Al-Razi, like cleanliness and bacteria and stitching. And then there is the Hebrew, the Byzantine, and the Islamic scholars preserving Greco-Roman law, like ideas of Plato and Socrates to Egyptian geometry. They preserved it while Western Europe was in the depth of the Dark Ages. So by the time we're done, here is the borders of Islam. We're going to go from Spain across North Africa. The different colors are the different caliphates. Constantinople is going to remain free for a time, but eventually it will fall as well. And so here's some examples of the Islamic accomplishments. In the upper left there is a sword made of Damascus steel, carbon in the iron to make it stronger, and the acid etching. The tall minaret, the decorative dome that the muezzin would go to and lead the call to prayer. The beautiful mosaic tiles making the nice pictures. Here's another minaret right here. Irrigation, cotton growing, leather working, you name it. And then literature with the epic voyages of Sinbad the Sailor and the Islamic shaped dome. So that's it. Very quick look Hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully you find it useful. This will be for your test this upcoming Monday. Talk to you guys soon.